story. I was in Vietnam, in Hanoi, and I met this lady. She was in the Danish embassy in Hanoi, and she's been in Copenhagen. And she asked me, do you have a baby boom in Copenhagen? Because she's been in Copenhagen and she saw a lot of babies and children in the city, so we must have a baby boom. In Denmark we have no baby boom, we have a problem of reproducing ourselves. Of course, here you can see that you get inspired in one shop and you can get the remedies in the next shop. But thinking about it, I realized that when you go to Copenhagen, you can see children all over the place. Every third family with children have a cargo bike where they can bicycle their children to school and to kindergarten. You see a lot of bicycles with children, 1, 2 or 3 children on the bicycles. When children in Denmark are 4 years old, they learn to bicycle, all of them, and they can start bicycling to school and with their parents right away when they are 4. If you have good bike lanes, which we have in Copenhagen, so you see a lot of children on the bike lanes. Also, you can see a lot of baby prams being pushed around because what do you do when you have maternity leave but take the baby out in the pram and move it about in the city and have coffee with your girlfriends? So in Copenhagen there's a lot of children. In Hanoi there's no children. There's no old people and no children because the city, the quality of the city is such that you try to keep your children away from the city. There are lots of children in Vietnam, but they are out in the houses, they are not in the city. And I realized that the sign of quality of a city is that there are children in the city. And also that there are old people in the city. That the city is for all of us. That the city has numerous qualities so that it's fun and nice for children, for grown-ups and for elderly. That's a good city. So realize that based on this lady's comment that Copenhagen, with all the children on the streets, is a nice, livable city. So that's one way of approaching quality of cities. Another way could be to look every year. A number of magazines have these lists of the most livable cities in the world. This is the list from Mercer, and you can see a number of cities here, and you will inevitably see many of the same cities popping up on all the various lists. Yeah, not to worry. But I'll tell a little bit more about what makes livable cities in my point of view. In a book I made some years ago, which has just come out in Russian also, we pointed out what public space were used for through the history of mankind. Public space has always been the meeting place where you could meet your fellow citizens. It's always been the marketplace, and it's always been the connection space between the various things in the city. In the old cities, all these functions were nicely integrated. It was done by people. You could walk through the city. Here is Venice. You could carry your eggs and buy an apple and watch the girls and talk to your friends, all in the same integrated space, because everything was done by people. And that was a traditional city which we've had throughout the history of mankind until around 1960, when we started to have the invaded city, when suddenly transportation and connection became the main issue in the city, and we had this invasion of the cars which completely pushed every other quality issue out. We saw that after a while we got numb, we forgot what city quality was all about, and we thought it's a good city if you're not killed by traffic, but it may not be a good city. We also organized our world so that everything was done to make the cars happy. Every city I know have a transport department, and they count all the cars every year to be able to make policy for traffic, policy for cars. But no city I know of have a department for people, for pedestrians, for public life. And no city I know of have any knowledge about how people use the city. And as you know, what you count, you care for. And if you count all the cars and doesn't count any people, then the policy is much more lean towards solving the traffic problems than to making it a nice city for people. And we can see how gradually our cities became more and more difficult places for people to move around in. All the qualities were gradually taken away, and the dignity of man was certainly not there anymore in the cities of today. But then we have seen also, especially in the last 20, 25, 30 years, a new type of city emerging that I call the reconquered city. That is a city where we're starting to win back the spaces, the public spaces, from the traffic to the people, and have a much more balanced view of what a good city is. A good city is not only a good city for cars, it should also be a good city for people, and actually meeting, market and motoring should be in a balance instead of in an unbalance. Some of the signs of these reconquered cities would be that they're willing to put some constraints to traffic. The London congestion charge is an example where by making a fee for going into the city centre, they lowered the traffic by 18%. And also we can see in these cities that they start to be careful in planning for walking and for the public life. It has been realized when public life was pushed out of the cities by the traffic that public life and the possibility to meet your fellow citizens in the city is a very, very important quality for mankind in their cities. We always were able to meet each other in the city, and in the reconquered city, the meeting place is again celebrated. So what we have now is another change of paradigm. There was a change of paradigm around 1960, where the modernistic city model and the motorized city model were introduced as paradigms of planning. But we have now a new paradigm. We want a lively and attractive, a safe, a sustainable and a healthy city. And actually, if we are sweet to pedestrians and sweet to bicyclists, we address all 5 issues which all the cities would like to address. We need a lively city, and everybody knows that a lively and livable city is what we dream of. And when we see pictures of nice places with people, we can see that's the kind of place I would like to be. And with smaller households and more spread out people and a more privatized life, the public life is more and more important in our society. Also, if we aim for a more people-oriented city planning, we can have a more attractive city because it becomes in people scale, less stress, less noise, pollution, and it's dominated by the most attractive thing in our lives, which are other people. Here are some boys in Italy. They are involved in admiring attraction number 1. If it's a people-oriented city, and if there are people around, it's also a safer city. It is realized, it is conceived as safer, and it is safer. Sorry about this one. Also, we need today more sustainable cities. We need it because of the climate challenge. And of course, the more people walk and bicycle in the city, the better for the climate. But there is a very important relation between good public transportation and good public rail, because all the people in the public transportation will have to be pedestrians in either end of the route. So good public life, good public rail and good public transportation, they're closely interlinked. In the future, we need much better and much more public transportation than we have been used to in the 50 years of cheap gasoline. Then we have got a new problem in our societies. That is the problem of health, that people, they sit all day, they sit in the morning, they sit in transport, they sit all day, they sit in the transport and they sit all evening and watch television. And we had the idea that everybody would rush over to the fitness center and take the escalator and sit in a rowing machine in 2 hours. But that's not a good model. That's why cities around the world realize that we shall build into city planning the invitation that people use. They move naturally, they walk more, they bicycle more. If you bicycle or walk an hour a day, you can live 7 years longer, and it's much cheaper for the health system than if you sit too much. So somewhere along the road something went terribly wrong, and we can actually make it much better in the city planning by inviting people to walk and to bicycle. I'll talk a little bit about cities which have invited these kind of activities. First, I'll tell you that when I graduated in 1960, nobody knew that planning and the physical form had any substantial influence on livability and lifestyles. Now we know that there is a fantastic influence. First we shape the cities, but then the city shape our daily day. We shape the buildings, and then they dictate what kind of life we can have around these buildings. I'll invite you to a number of cities which have started to take on this challenge of making livable cities for the 21st century. One of them is Copenhagen. This year, this November, Copenhagen is celebrating an important anniversary. It is 50 years since we started to push the traffic back from the major cities of the city, streets of the city. At the first, nobody thought that it could ever work in Scandinavia. It was too cold, and we were not Italians, and it would never work. It worked beautifully, and they have expanded all the time, and more started to think of people instead of thinking of traffic. And they've had 50 years to improve the city. When all this started, all the squares in Copenhagen were full of parked cars. Every single one now has been cleared of parking and is now a people space. They've had the policy of taking 3% of the parking out of the city every year for 30 years. And the traffic engineer would say, if we do it slowly and doesn't tell anyone, nobody will notice. So he is taking car parking away from the city center, gradually training people to go to the city in other ways than by cars. What is very important about Copenhagen is not only that the pedestrian areas have been widened and widened and widened, but also that all these things have been followed closely in surveying how people use the city. And all this survey of how the people are using the city has been used actively in city planning and has influenced Copenhagen city planning to a more humanistic direction. The surveys was done firstly by the university, but now they are done by the city as part of what every city should do, and they found it very useful to know exactly how the city is used, and then they can make policy about the future. So we know a lot about Copenhagen. There are more people walking, there are more people sitting and enjoying, and more events and carnivals and whatever. So the city center became very nice, but all this kind of people thinking has now permeated the whole city, and they actually changed all the major streets from 4-lane streets into 2-lane streets with trees and medium and bicycle lanes and whatever. And these streets down there, they can take almost the same number of cars, but they are much more safe and they're much more beautiful and friendly. We have not reached this point in Copenhagen yet, but we are closing in. What is happening in Copenhagen is that they take when the side street goes into Big Street, they take the sidewalk and the bicycle lane across, so that the school children can now walk to school all the way on the sidewalk. Even if there are some streets, then the sidewalks have priority and the people in the cars will have to pass the sidewalk. That means that my granddaughter, Laura, 8, she can now walk to school because she can stay on the sidewalk all the way to school. That's part of Copenhagen being a city for children. Copenhagen now has a policy: we will be the best city in the world for people. And we have to walk more and spend more time in public spaces. They have a big policy, and because they count all the activities in the city regularly, they can have goals and they can see if the goals are met. Also in Copenhagen, they've had this bicycle policy. There is a complete network now of bicycle lanes in all the streets, all the major streets of the city. And bicycling is really an alternative transportation means where you can transport everything, including your children. It's become more and more safe to bicycle. They have special crossing, special lights. And bicycling is integrated with the other transport systems so that you can have bicycle on all the taxis. In all the trains you can for free take your bicycle, and there are lots of room in the trains. By now there is a complete culture of bicycling. Everybody bicycles. You can bring your base, that's fine. You even bike in the winter. And by now we have 37% of everybody going to work on bicycles. Copenhagen has another goal to be the best in the world for bicycles, and they are rapidly closing in on that. There are problems, too many bicycles now, and major congestion on bicycle lanes, but they are widening the bicycle lanes. And when the new government went to the Queen to be commissioned as ministers, they arrived on bicycle. There is a new culture running. Goodbye to the limousines and a new way of moving about. I could go on, and I can see from the moderator that I should not, so I will rush through. In Melbourne, they have the same policy. It used to be a very dull city center. They have completely changed the city center and made it a very wonderful place for people. They have many more people now. They have many more people sitting, walking, whatever. And all the economic factors in Melbourne are up. And for 4 times in the last 10 years, it's become the most livable city in the world. Melbourne, Australia. Sydney, they are full speed into this. It's a good city for opera houses, but it's not good for ordinary days. It's a very lousy city. It's going now to be improved, and they are putting in bicycle lanes with a great speed. Sydney. New York, the mayor in 2007 declared that it should be the most green metropole in the world. You can walk in New York, but you cannot sit. And they use the bicycle to protect the cars. Now they are putting in 5,000 kilometers of bicycle lanes inspired by Copenhagen. And they also realized they didn't have places to sit. So a place like Broadway is being changed, widening sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and they have stopped Broadway from the traffic in a number of places. This is Times Square in the early part of 2009. and this is Times Square in the summer of 2009. It was closed as an experiment, but now the mayor, half a year later, said it's not an experiment, it's the biggest success we've had for 100 years in New York City. It will stay a people place, Times Square. So, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. If you can make it on Broadway, you can make it anywhere. Then you can think about it. It's very interesting that cities are getting all these prizes. The best city in the world prize. Second year, it was given this year to New York, and you can see that Melbourne and Copenhagen are runners-up in this competition. You can see the most livable cities on the Mercer list, and you can see that 6 of them have adopted these people-oriented policies. If you look at the list of the economists or the list of monarchy, you will find that 5 or 7 of the cities have adopted these people-oriented policies. That is a sure way to be a more livable city for everyone. Where are we now? We are working hard in Moscow to apply all these ideas as best we can on Tverskaya, where they have 1 meter of walking space. They have started to take the cars away from the sidewalks. They will also take them away from the pedestrian crossings. In Russia now we have all my books translated, and I will personally make sure that they are read. And I welcome you to the 21st